A millionaire farmer, known for his coldness, watches his 6-year-old autistic daughter with contempt. "If you scream and behave like an animal, then you'll live with them," he says, before chaining her in the pig pen among the pigs. The girl, with eyes that reflect confusion and pain, doesn't understand such cruelty. But a majestic white horse observes everything from the nearby stable. When the father plans to get rid of his daughter permanently, the animal makes a decision that will change everything. Before we dive in, if you love animals as much as we do, hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss any emotional stories. Thanks. Let's get back to our story. The sun rose lazily over the vast fields of Golden Fields Ranch, painting the crops gold as far as the eye could see. The morning air carried the scent of damp earth mixed with the characteristic smell of livestock, creating an olfactory symphony that should have been comforting, but in this place, it held dark secrets. In the most remote pig pen on the property, where the sounds from the main house couldn't reach, a small figure huddled against the damp wooden planks. Lara was only 6, but her brown eyes already carried a weight no child so young should bear. Her clothes, a pink dress that had once been pretty, were now caked in mud and stained by the tears that silently streamed down her delicate face. The girl's right ankle was shackled by a cold chain connecting her to a stake driven into the ground. Around her, the pigs moved with their characteristic grunts, yet curiously, they seemed to avoid harming their small prisoner. It was as if they understood, in some primitive way, that this child did not belong there. "If you scream and act like an animal, then you'll live with them." The cruel words echoed in Lara's mind like a painful mantra. They had come from her own father, Richard Morgan, a man whose wealth was as vast as his heart was small. To him, his autistic daughter was merely a blemish on his perfect reputation, a problem that needed to be hidden from the eyes of the conservative rural society. From the nearby stable, through the wooden slats, a pair of intelligent eyes watched everything. It was Tempest, a magnificent white stallion whose name contrasted with his gentle nature. The animal seemed to comprehend the girl's suffering in a way no human in that place could. His nostrils flared when he caught the scent of fear and sadness emanating from the pig pen, and his low neighs sounded almost like whispers of comfort. Lara looked at the horse, and for a moment their eyes met. It was a silent, primitive, yet profoundly real communication. The girl stretched out her small hand towards the animal, and Tempest moved as close as his own tethers allowed. For a few precious moments, they shared a connection that transcended the barriers imposed by humans. Richard Morgan's ranch was known throughout the county as a model of prosperity and efficiency. His herds were the healthiest, his crops the most productive, and his profits the most enviable. What no one knew was the price an innocent child paid for this apparent perfection. In the main house, Richard walked along the porch with firm steps, wearing his impeccable suit even in the early morning. His graying hair was perfectly combed, and his face maintained the serious expression that had become his trademark. At 42, he had built an empire based on emotional coldness and an inability to accept anything he considered imperfect. The death of his wife, Elena, during Lara's birth, had been the final blow to a heart already hardening. Instead of embracing his daughter as a reminder of lost love, Richard secretly blamed her for the tragedy. The girl's autism, diagnosed when she was 3, was the final straw that turned his indifference into cruelty. That particular morning, a new employee was due to arrive at the ranch. Dr. Marina Scott, a young, newly graduated veterinarian, had been hired to care for the property's animals. She had no idea she was about to uncover a secret that would change her life forever. While Richard adjusted his gold watch, checking the new employee's arrival time, Lara remained in the pig pen, gently rocking her body in a repetitive motion that calmed her. Her small fingers drew patterns in the damp earth, creating shapes only she understood. The sound of an approaching car made Richard straighten his shoulders. It was time for another presentation of his fabricated perfection, while his daughter remained forgotten among the animals, waiting for a miracle that never seemed to arrive. The blue Ford Focus kicked up a cloud of dust as it parked in front of the main house of Golden Fields Ranch. Marina Scott turned off the engine and took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that always accompanied her on first days of work. At 26, she had just graduated from veterinary school, and this was her first real opportunity to put her knowledge into practice. Her hands trembled slightly as she tied her brown hair into a practical ponytail. Marina knew that working for Richard Morgan would be a challenge. The rancher's reputation as a demanding boss had reached even the university. But she needed this opportunity, both financially and professionally. Richard appeared on the porch before she could even knock. His smile was calculated, professional, not reaching the cold eyes that appraised her from head to toe. "Dr. Scott, I presume. Welcome to my property." His voice carried a tone of absolute ownership, as if everything and everyone there belonged entirely to him. "Good morning, Mr. Morgan. I'm very excited to start." Marina extended her hand, which was gripped with unnecessary force by the rancher. She immediately noticed how he tried to intimidate through seemingly cordial gestures. "Let's get straight to business. My ranch operates with military precision. I don't tolerate tardiness, I don't accept excuses, and I expect results." Richard began walking towards the stables, his long strides forcing Marina to quicken her pace to keep up. "You'll be responsible for the entire cattle herd, the riding horses and the pigs. Any problems must be reported immediately to me." As they walked, Marina observed the impressive organization of the property. Every fence was perfectly aligned. Every animal seemed healthy and well cared for, at least at first glance. It was hard not to be impressed by the apparent efficiency of the place. "How many employees work here?" Marina asked, trying to make conversation. "The necessary number." Richard's curt reply made it clear he wasn't interested in socializing. "You'll primarily work with John, the horse handler, and Peter, who's in charge of the cattle. They're trustworthy men who know their duties." They passed the main stable, where Marina saw Tempest for the first time. The white stallion was truly magnificent, but something in his demeanor caught her attention. The animal seemed agitated, restless, as if something deeply disturbed him. "This is our most valuable stud," Richard said with genuine pride, the first real emotion Marina had perceived in him. "Tempest is worth more than many houses in town. Take good care of him." Marina approached the horse, extending her hand carefully. Tempest sniffed her briefly, but his eyes remained fixed on something beyond the stables. Following the animal's gaze, Marina saw the pig pens in the distance and felt an inexplicable chill. "And the pigs? Are they also part of my duties?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Richard's face hardened imperceptibly. "The pig pens are a restricted area. Peter handles everything there. You have no need to concern yourself with that part of the property." The tone was final, even threatening. Marina nodded, but the prohibition only piqued her curiosity. In her experience, when someone tried to hide something, there was usually a troubling reason. The rest of the morning was spent getting to know the permitted facilities and the other employees. John, the horse handler, was a man in his 50s, with sad eyes who avoided prolonged eye contact. Peter, responsible for the cattle, seemed constantly nervous, as if carrying an invisible weight on his shoulders. During lunch, served in the staff house, Marina tried to ask casual questions about the boss's family. The answers were evasive, whispered, accompanied by worried glances towards the main house. "Does Mr. Morgan have a family?" Marina asked John. The older man nearly choked on his food. "He had a wife. Died in childbirth. There's a girl, but..." He stopped abruptly, as if he'd said too much. "But what?" Marina pressed gently. "Nothing. It's none of our business." John stood up abruptly and left, leaving Marina with more questions than answers. In the afternoon, while examining the cattle, Marina intermittently heard sounds coming from the direction of the pig pens. They weren't just pig grunts. There was something else. Something that sounded almost human. She shook her head, trying to dismiss the unsettling thoughts. When the workday ended, Marina politely said goodbye to Richard and drove back to her small rented house in town. But the unease that had begun in the stable grew with every mile. There was something wrong with that perfect ranch, and she had the disturbing feeling she was about to uncover a secret that would change everything. Marina's second week at the ranch began with a medical emergency that would change the course of her life forever. Tempest had developed colic during the night, and John had called her before sunrise. The handler's desperate call made it clear that the valuable stallion was in real danger. Marina arrived at the ranch while dew still covered the grass, carrying her vet bag and a portable ultrasound machine she had borrowed from a clinic in town. Richard was waiting for her at the stable, visibly worried. It was the first time she'd seen him show genuine emotion. "He's been like this since 3 this morning," John explained, his hands trembling as he held the horse's lead rope. "He won't eat, he won't stop sweating, and look how restless he is." Marina examined Tempest carefully, checking his vital signs and palpating his abdomen. The horse was clearly uncomfortable, but there was something more to his behavior, an agitation that seemed to go beyond physical pain. His eyes kept darting towards the pig pens, and he neighed softly in a way that sounded almost human. "I'll need to sedate him lightly to do the ultrasound," Marina explained, preparing the medication. "Mr. Morgan, could you bring me some clean towels from the house? I'll need a more hygienic environment for the procedure." Richard hesitated, glancing nervously at the distant pig pens. "John can get whatever you need. Actually, I need specific towels, and it would be quicker if you went personally." "I know the necessary supplies," Marina insisted, sensing the rancher's reluctance to leave her alone. Reluctantly, Richard walked off towards the main house, but not before casting a warning look at John. The handler immediately lowered his eyes like a scolded dog. As soon as Richard was out of sight, Marina administered the light sedative to Tempest. The horse gradually calmed, but his eyes remained fixed on the forbidden direction. Curious and seizing the opportunity, Marina decided to investigate what was so disturbing the animal. "John, I'm going to take a quick look at the pig pens. There might be something there stressing Tempest out," she said, trying to sound casual. John's face paled. "Doctor, please, don't go there. The boss doesn't like anyone near the pigs without his permission." "I'm a veterinarian, John. It's my responsibility to check if anything might be affecting the other animals." Marina was already walking, her determination growing in the face of his resistance. Every step towards the pig pens made her heart beat faster. The smell intensified. Not just the normal odor of pigs, but something more unsettling, more human. When she finally reached the enclosures, what she saw made her stop abruptly, her legs nearly giving way beneath her. Among the pigs, chained by her ankle, was a small girl. Lara looked up at the sound of footsteps, and Marina saw in that gaze all the pain and confusion a child should never bear. The girl's pink dress was dirty and torn, her hair matted and her face streaked with dried tears. "My God," Marina whispered, her voice failing. She approached slowly, as she would a wounded animal, her hands trembling violently. Lara flinched initially, but something in Marina's expression, the first genuine kindness she'd seen in weeks, made her relax slightly. The girl didn't speak, but her eyes filled with cautious hope. "Hi, sweetie," Marina said softly, kneeling beside the fence. "My name is Marina. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Lara shook her head negatively, but remained silent. Marina noticed the girl's repetitive movements, the way she avoided direct eye contact, and her experience with special needs animals helped her recognize the signs of autism. The sound of approaching footsteps made Marina turn quickly. Richard was returning with the towels, his face a mask of controlled fury at seeing her where she shouldn't be. "Dr. Scott," his voice was dangerously low, "I believe I made it clear this area is restricted." Marina rose slowly, her body trembling with indignation and horror. "Mr. Morgan, there's a child chained up here. A child. There's a special needs child being kept where she can't hurt herself or others," Richard replied coldly. "Lara has violent episodes. For her own safety, she sometimes needs to be isolated." Isolated? She's chained up among pigs. Marina could barely control her voice. "She's my daughter, and I decide what's best for her." The threat in Richard's voice was clear. "I suggest you focus on the job you were hired for. Tempest still needs care." Marina looked once more at Lara, who had shrunk back even further at the sound of her father's voice. The girl's eyes silently pleaded for help, and Marina made a silent promise. She would find a way to save this child, no matter the cost. Marina couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lara's face. Those brown eyes, full of a pain and resignation no 6-year-old should carry. She paced her small, simple rented house in town, her hands trembling whenever she thought of the chain around the girl's ankle. At 5 in the morning, she gave up trying to sleep. She made strong coffee and sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, frantically researching child protection laws, hotline numbers, and organizations that could help. But with every search, the reality became more disheartening. Richard Morgan had deep political connections in the county. The rancher had donated generously to election campaigns, sponsored local church events, and even funded renovations at the town's sheriff's office. His name appeared in local papers, always associated with acts of charity and economic progress. How could anyone report a man considered a pillar of the community? When she arrived at the ranch that morning, Marina tried to maintain professional composure, but her eyes constantly searched in the direction of the pig pens. Tempest had fully recovered from the colic, but his behavior remained altered. The horse seemed to sense Marina's tension and became even more agitated when she approached. "Morning, Doctor." John greeted her but avoided looking directly into her eyes. There was something different about his posture, a heavy guilt he carried on his slumped shoulders. "John," Marina said softly, "we need to talk." The older man glanced around nervously before motioning for her to follow him to a more secluded corner of the stable. His hands worked nervously on an old rope as he spoke in whispers. "Doctor, for God's sake, don't get involved in this. Mr. Morgan, he's not a man who tolerates interference." His words tumbled out, laden with years of accumulated fear. "John, a child is being mistreated. A child." Marina struggled to keep her voice low. "How can you all just stay silent?" John's eyes filled. With tears he tried to hide. "You think we haven't tried? Peter once suggested the girl needed medical care. You know what happened? Fired on the spot, no severance. And Richard spread rumors about him all over the county. The man couldn't find work anywhere for 2 years. Marina felt a chill in her stomach. "And the Peter who works here now? He's the younger brother. Came to work to support Peter's family when he couldn't get a job. We have families, Doctor, kids to raise, bills to pay. And if we say anything..." John didn't need to finish the sentence. Throughout the morning, Marina observed the ranch's dynamics with new eyes. Every employee walked as if on eggshells, spoke in whispers when Richard wasn't around, and avoided any behavior that could be interpreted as questioning the boss's authority. At lunchtime, she tried a different approach with Peter, the cattleman. He was a young man, perhaps her age, with eyes that seemed to have aged prematurely. "Peter, do you have children?" Marina asked casually as they shared the simple meal. "I have a 5-year-old girl," he replied, and Marina saw his face light up as he spoke of his daughter. "She's the light of my life. Smart, affectionate, everything a father could want. Must be hard to be away from her during the day." Peter nodded, but his expression turned somber. "Sometimes I think, if something happened to her, if someone hurt her." He stopped abruptly, realizing the dangerous turn of the conversation. Marina saw her opportunity. "Peter, if you knew a child was being mistreated, what would you do?" The man turned pale. He looked around nervously before leaning closer. "Doctor, you don't understand. Mr. Morgan, he has eyes and ears everywhere. The sheriff's wife works at his bank. The county judge owes him favors. The mayor was elected with his money. But there must be someone," Marina insisted. "There was a teacher years ago who asked why the girl wasn't attending school. You know what happened? Word got out she'd experimented with drugs in college, over a decade earlier. Suddenly, everyone in town knew. She lost her job, her reputation, everything." Peter shook his head sadly. "Mr. Morgan doesn't just have power, he knows how to use it." In the afternoon, when Richard left for a meeting in town, Marina found the courage to approach the pig pens again. Lara was in the same spot, but this time she didn't shrink away when she saw Marina approaching. "Hi, Lara," Marina said softly, kneeling by the fence. "Do you remember me? I'm Marina." The girl nodded slightly, her large, expressive eyes fixed on Marina's face. There was a deep intelligence in those eyes, an understanding beyond her years. Marina pulled a granola bar from her pocket. It was all she had. "Are you hungry?" Lara extended a small, dirty hand through the wooden planks. When her tiny hands touched Marina's, the veterinarian felt her heart break. The child's skin was cold, and she could feel how Lara was far too thin. "Lara, I want to help you, but I need you to be strong, okay? I'm going to find a way to get you out of here." The girl didn't respond verbally, but her silent tears said everything. Marina realized Lara didn't cry with sobs or screams. She had learned to be silent, even in her pain. When the sound of Richard's car approached, Marina quickly moved away, but she carried with her a renewed determination. No matter how many obstacles Richard put in her path, she would find a way to save Lara. There were children in the world who depended on adults brave enough to break the silence, and Marina decided she would be one of them. Marina woke with an iron determination she hadn't felt in years. If the local system was corrupted by Richard's influence, she would need to seek outside help. She sat down again in front of her computer, but this time her search was more strategic and targeted. She found contact information for human rights organizations in the state capital, groups specializing in the protection of autistic children, and even lawyers who worked on child abuse cases. Every phone number she jotted down represented a small spark of hope, but Marina knew she needed more than just reports. She needed evidence. She took out her cell phone and checked the camera. Quality. It wasn't professional, but it would suffice to document Lara's situation. She also downloaded an audio recording app that worked discreetly in the background. At the ranch, Marina adopted a new strategy. Instead of appearing suspicious or anxious, she strived to demonstrate exemplary professionalism. She arrived earlier, worked with redoubled efficiency, and showed impressive results in animal care. Her idea was to gain Richard's trust, to have more freedom of movement. "Dr. Scott," Richard greeted her that morning, and she noticed a slightly less hostile tone in his voice. "John told me Tempest is completely recovered. Good work." "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. That's what motivates me, seeing the animals healthy and well cared for." Marina forced a professional smile. "Actually, I'd like to do a general assessment of all the animals on the property, including the pigs. A kind of preventive health report." Richard's face hardened slightly, but Marina continued quickly. Of course, always with your supervision or Peter's. I just want to ensure we're preventing any possible diseases that could spread between species. It was a solid medical justification, and Richard couldn't refuse it without appearing suspicious. Very well, but do it quickly and with Peter present at all times. During the afternoon, Marina got her first real opportunity. Peter accompanied her to the pig pens, nervous and clearly uncomfortable. While she pretended to examine the pigs' health, she seized moments when Peter was distracted to discreetly photograph the conditions of the place where Lara was kept. The girl was there as always, but this time Marina noticed something different. Lara had made small drawings in the dirt with a stick, simple shapes that seemed to represent a house, a female figure, whom Marina suspected was herself, and a horse. It was a silent form of communication, and Marina felt her heart warm as she realized she had made a genuine connection with the child. Peter, Marina said carefully, have you ever noticed how Lara communicates through drawings? Peter looked nervously at the drawings in the dirt. She's always done that. Mr. Morgan says they're just meaningless scribbles, but I always thought she was trying to tell us something. Marina sensed an opening. Actually, these shapes show developed spatial intelligence. Autistic children often have unique talents that are misunderstood. Autistic? Peter repeated the word as if it were the first time he'd heard it applied to Lara. You didn't know? Marina feigned surprise. It's a neurological condition. It's not a disease, not a mental disability. It's just a different way of processing the world. With the right support, autistic children can lead absolutely normal and productive lives. Marina saw something change in Peter's eyes. It was as if a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. So she's not dangerous, violent? Of course not. The meltdowns autistic children might have are a result of sensory overload or frustration from not being able to communicate. With patience and understanding, these situations are perfectly manageable. Marina chose each word carefully. That night at home, Marina organized the material she had collected. The photos clearly showed the inadequate conditions, the chain on Lara's ankle, and the unsanitary environment. She had also discreetly recorded some disparaging comments Richard had made about his daughter during the day. But when she tried to make the first calls to organizations in the capital, she discovered another frustrating obstacle. It was late Friday afternoon, and most offices were closed until Monday. The emergency numbers she managed to contact asked her to first approach local authorities, exactly those Richard controlled. Over the weekend, Marina couldn't focus on anything else. She visited the town library, where she got access to faster internet and researched Richard Morgan's background more deeply. What she discovered was even more disturbing. There were sparse mentions in online forums about other employees who had abruptly left the ranch over the years. Some vague comments suggested that strange things happened on the property, but never anything specific enough to constitute real evidence. Marina also found records of Richard's generous donations to the current mayor's campaign, investments in the sheriff's businesses, and even sponsorship for the renovation of the church, where the local judge was an active board member. On Sunday night, Marina made a crucial decision. On Monday, she would call the human rights organization in the capital, even if it meant exposing her identity as a whistleblower. She would also start documenting everything more systematically. Every visit to Lara, every cruel comment from Richard, every sign of fear in the employees. She had realized something important. Even if Richard had local power, state and federal organizations operated beyond his influence. And if she could build a strong enough case, even the most powerful man in the county couldn't escape the consequences. As she prepared for bed, Marina looked at a photo of Lara she had discreetly saved on her phone. The determination, in her eyes intensified. "Hold on a little longer, sweetie," she whispered to the screen. "Help is coming." Monday dawned heavy with tension. Marina arrived at the ranch with a mixture of nervousness and determination, knowing this would be a crucial day. In her bag, hidden among veterinary supplies, she carried a more sophisticated digital recorder she had bought over the weekend and some nutritional bars for Lara. Richard was waiting for her on the porch of the main house, his cold eyes studying her every move. "Dr. Scott, I need to speak with you." His voice carried a tone she hadn't heard before, a veiled threat that made her blood run cold. "Of course, Mr. Morgan. Is something wrong with the animals?" "Actually, yes. Some employees have commented that you've been asking unusual questions about matters that don't concern your veterinary work." Richard descended the steps slowly, like a predator approaching its prey. Marina forced an expression of innocent confusion. "I don't understand, Mr. Morgan. I've strictly limited myself to animal care. Questions about families, about children, about how people would react to certain hypothetical situations." Each of Richard's words was measured, calculated. "It makes me wonder if you're not forgetting the purpose of your presence here." Marina's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I was just trying to get to know the team better, Mr. Morgan. I believe a good work environment contributes to efficiency." Richard moved closer, invading her personal space. "Let me be clear, Dr. Scott. You were hired to care for animals, only animals. Any interest in other matters will be interpreted as interference in issues that do not concern you. And I do not tolerate interference." The threat was crystal clear. Marina nodded submissively, but inwardly her determination only strengthened. If Richard was this nervous, it meant she was on the right track. During the morning, Marina noticed subtle changes at the ranch. There was a new employee she didn't know, a large, silent man who seemed more interested in watching people than working with animals. She suspected he was some kind of private security hired to watch her. John completely avoided her gaze, and Peter seemed even more nervous than usual. It was obvious Richard had spoken to everyone, probably making veiled threats about the consequences of talking too much to the veterinarian. During lunch, Marina tried a different approach. Instead of asking direct questions, she began sharing stories about cases she had studied in college, stories about animals saved from neglect, about the importance of reporting abuse. "You know," she said casually to Peter and John, "in college, we studied a case where a vet saved not only animals, but a child who was being kept in inhumane conditions. The vet was considered a hero." Peter nearly choked on his food. John stood up abruptly and left without finishing his meal. Marina realized she had struck a nerve, but also that the men were beginning to question their own silent complicity. In the afternoon, seizing a moment when the new employee was distracted, Marina managed to approach the pig pens. Lara was visibly weaker than the previous week. The girl had lost weight, and her clothes seemed even dirtier and more torn. "Lara, I brought you something," Marina whispered, passing a nutritional bar through the planks. The girl took the food with trembling hands and devoured it quickly, as if she hadn't eaten in a long time. Marina discreetly turned on the recorder and began asking gentle questions. "Lara, can you show me how you feel?" The girl picked up the stick she used for drawing and traced figures in the dirt. A small figure surrounded by bars, a large figure with an angry expression, and tears falling from the small figure's eyes. The drawing was too eloquent to be ignored. Marina quickly photographed the girl's work before anyone could see it. "Dr. Scott!" Richard's voice cut through the air like a whip. He had approached silently and was clearly furious. "What are you doing here? I thought I made it clear this area is off limits." "Sorry, Mr. Morgan. Tempest was agitated again, and I thought it might be because of some noise coming from the pig pens. Marina lied quickly, trying to keep her voice steady. Tempest is perfectly fine. I just checked. Richard moved closer, his eyes locked on hers. Dr. Scott, I'm beginning to question whether you're the right professional for my ranch. The threat of dismissal hung in the air like a dark cloud. Marina knew if she were fired now, Lara would be left completely unprotected. Mr. Morgan, I apologize if my actions were misinterpreted. I just want to do my job to the best of my ability. Then do exactly that. Just your job. Richard turned to leave, but stopped and looked over his shoulder. And Dr. Scott, I suggest you be very careful with your actions in the coming days. Accidents can happen on ranches, especially to people who don't know the local dangers well. The threat was now explicit. Marina felt a chill down her spine, but also a rising anger. Richard was so desperate to protect his secret that he was willing to directly threaten an employee. That night, Marina finally made contact with a human rights organization in the state capital. The woman who answered, Dr. Carmen Rodriguez, listened intently to her story and asked her to send all evidence via encrypted email. Marina, Carmen said, what you're describing is extremely serious, but we need to be strategic. If this man has as much local power as you say, a direct approach could result in evidence destroyed and you in real danger. So what do? I can't just let that child suffer. No, you can't, but let's do this right. Keep documenting, but be extremely careful. I'm contacting a federal investigator who specializes in cases like this. He'll arrive in the area undercover within a week. Marina hung up with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Help was coming, but a week felt like an eternity when it came to Lara's suffering, and now she knew Richard suspected her true intentions. From now on, every day would be a race against time, where one false move could result in terrible consequences for everyone involved. The Wednesday of the third week brought an event no one could have foreseen. Marina arrived at the ranch to find John in an absolute state of panic, his hands trembling violently as he tried to explain the situation. Doctor, it's Tempest. He broke his tethers during the night and is completely out of control. The words tumbled from the handler's mouth. We can't get near him. He's attacking anyone who tries to approach. Marina rushed to the stable and was met with an extraordinary scene. Tempest, the normally docile white stallion, was in a total rage. But it wasn't a blind fury. There was something directed, intentional in his behavior. The horse had systematically destroyed part of his stall and was now strategically positioned between the stable and the pig pens, as if standing guard. When did this start? Marina asked, observing the animal's intriguing behavior. Around 3. This morning, John replied, wiping sweat from his brow. But doctor, there's something else strange. He's not trying to escape. It's like he's protecting something. Richard appeared at that moment, his face a mask of concern that Marina suspected was more about financial loss than the animal's well-being. Dr. Scott, I need you to resolve this immediately. That horse is worth a fortune. Marina approached Tempest carefully, speaking in low, reassuring tones. The horse recognized her and slightly lessened his agitation, but his eyes remained fixed on the pig pens. Suddenly, Marina understood. Tempest knew about Lara. Somehow, the intelligent animal had sensed the child's suffering and was trying to protect her. Mr. Morgan, I'll need to sedate him to examine him properly, Marina said, preparing her bag. But first, I need to understand what's causing this agitation. Can I take a walk around the property to check if anything is disturbing the animals? Richard hesitated, but the horse's value spoke louder than his paranoia. Do whatever is necessary, but be quick. Marina seized the opportunity to head towards the pig pens, involuntarily accompanied by Tempest, who insisted on following her despite John's protests. When they reached the spot, Marina discovered something that horrified her. Lara was no longer chained in the pig pen. In her place, there was only the empty chain and marks in the dirt, suggesting she'd been dragged away. Marina's heart raced as she desperately searched for signs of the girl. "Lara!" she shouted, momentarily forgetting discretion. "Lara, where are you?" "Dees!" Tempest began to neigh loudly and stomp his hooves, pointing with his head towards the main house. Following the animal's intuition, Marina ran towards the house, the horse galloping beside her, despite John's protesting shouts. At the back of the main house, Marina found a basement entrance she had never noticed before. The door was ajar, and from within came muffled sounds that made her blood run cold. Without hesitation, she descended the old wooden stairs, using her phone's flashlight to light the way. What she found in the basement surpassed her worst fears. Lara was chained to a damp wall, in conditions even worse than in the pig pen. The girl was visibly dehydrated, her skin pale and her lips cracked. Upon seeing Marina, Lara's eyes filled with tears of relief. "My God, Lara!" Marina knelt beside the child, quickly checking her vital signs. The girl was weak but conscious. "I'm getting you out of here right now." But when Marina tried to break the chain, she found it was too strong for her hands. She would need tools or help. Just then, she heard heavy footsteps descending the stairs. Richard appeared at the basement entrance, his face contorted in a rage Marina had never seen before. "Dr. Scott, I see you've finally discovered all my secrets. Mr. Morgan, this is inhumane. She's your daughter." Marina placed herself protectively in front of Lara. "She's a problem I deal with as I see fit." Richard descended a few more steps, blocking the only exit. "And now you've become a problem too." The situation had become dangerous in a way Marina hadn't anticipated. She was trapped in the basement with Lara, with no means of escape, and Richard clearly had no intention of keeping up appearances any longer. Suddenly, the sound of hooves pounding violently on the floor above echoed through the basement. Tempest had found a way into the house and was clearly looking for them. The horses' neighs were so loud and desperate they began to attract attention. "What the hell?" Richard looked up at the ceiling with growing irritation. John appeared at the top of the stairs, breathless. "Mr. Morgan, the horse is in the house. He's destroying everything, and people from town are coming to see what's happening." It was the chaos Marina needed. With Richard momentarily distracted, she screamed with all her might. "Help! We're in the basement! Help!" The cry echoed through the house, amplified by Tempest's neighs. Richard turned to her with murderous eyes, but it was too late. Voices of strangers could be heard upstairs, drawn by the extraordinary noise. "John, get out of here! You saw nothing!" Richard yelled at the employee, but John didn't move. For the first time in years, the older man was seeing his chance to do the right thing. "Mr. Morgan," John said, his voice trembling but determined, "I can't pretend I don't see any more." Tempest had achieved something Marina alone could not, creating a situation that completely exposed Richard's secret. The horse, with his extraordinary intelligence, had orchestrated the perfect rescue. As unfamiliar voices approached the basement and Richard realized his carefully constructed world was crumbling, Marina held Lara's small, cold hand, whispering, "It's over, sweetie. You're safe now." The turning point had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The voices approaching the basement belonged to curious neighbors who had come to investigate the extraordinary noise coming from Golden Fields Ranch. Mrs. Henderson, a 70-year-old woman who lived on the adjacent property, was the first down the stairs, followed by her son Carl and two other men from the area. What they saw left them in absolute shock. Richard Morgan, the respected rancher, stood before A child chained in deplorable conditions, while a young woman protected her with her own body. The scene was so disturbing that Mrs. Henderson clutched her chest and began to cry. "Good heavens, Richard, what is this?" Her voice trembled with horror and disbelief. Richard tried to regain his usual composure, but the situation was completely out of his control. "Henderson, this is none of your business. All of you, get off my property immediately." "None of our business?" Carl, a robust man in his 40s, descended the remaining steps with determination. "Richard, that's a child in chains." Marina seized the confusion to act. "Please help me free her. There must be a key somewhere, or we need to break this chain." Her voice was firm despite the fear she felt. John, who had remained at the top of the stairs as if paralyzed, finally came down. With trembling hands, he pulled a small key from his pocket. The key. I knew where he kept it. I should have done this a long time ago. As John freed Lara from the chain, the girl clung to Marina as if her life depended on it. Her small arms wrapped around the veterinarian's neck, and for the first time in weeks, she murmured an almost inaudible word: "Marina." The name from Lara's lips had a devastating impact on everyone present. Even Richard seemed to lose some of his arrogance, as he realized his daughter had emotionally bonded with the only person who had tried to protect her. "Let's take her upstairs," Marina said softly, carrying Lara in her arms. The girl was lighter than she should be, and Marina could feel her protruding bones through her skin. Upstairs, more people had arrived, drawn by the noise and the parked cars. Tempest was still in the living room, but had calmed down as soon as he saw Marina appear with Lara. The horse approached delicately, craning his neck to nuzzle the girl, as if checking if she was okay. Mrs. Henderson, having recovered from her initial shock, adopted a maternal stance. "Bring clean water and some light food for this child. Carl, call the police and the hospital." "You're not calling anyone," Richard exploded, his mask of civility finally dropping completely. "You don't know anything. This girl is dangerous, violent. I was protecting all of you." "Protecting?" Peter's voice emerged from the growing crowd. The young man had arrived with other employees, drawn by the tumult. "Mr. Morgan, I have a daughter. Her age. This isn't protection, this is cruelty." Peter approached Lara, who was still in Marina's arms. "Lara, do you remember me? I'm Peter." His voice was gentle, laden with deep guilt. The girl looked at him with her large brown eyes and nodded slightly. "I'm so sorry," Peter said, his words directed at both Lara and Marina. "I'm so sorry I didn't have the courage before." Marina looked around the room, full of shocked neighbors and employees. "Has anyone called the authorities?" "I called the sheriff," Carl replied. "They're on their way." Richard, realizing his world was collapsing, tried one last strategy. "You'll all regret this. I have friends in high places. You don't know who you're messing with." "No, Richard," Mrs. Henderson said with a firmness surprising for her age. "You're the one who doesn't know who you're messing with. You may have bought many people's silence, but you can't buy our conscience when we see a child suffering." Marina sat in a chair, still holding Lara, who had begun to relax for the first time in weeks. The girl gently played with a lock of Marina's hair, a simple gesture that spoke volumes about the trust she had developed. "Lara," Marina whispered, "do you want to draw something for me?" The girl nodded, and Mrs. Henderson quickly brought paper and pencils. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, Lara began to draw. Her small hands created simple but powerful images: a large, dark figure with an angry expression, a small figure behind bars, and then, in a sequence that brought tears to many eyes, a female figure extending a hand to the child, a white horse beside them, and finally, the child free, smiling. The drawings told the whole story better than any verbal testimony could. When the police sirens finally wailed in the distance, Richard made one last desperate attempt to control the situation. "Listen to me carefully. I can make all of you lose your jobs, your land, everything." But his words fell on deaf ears. The power he had wielded for so long over these people had shattered the moment they saw Lara chained in the basement. There were lines that could not be crossed, even by the wealthiest man in the county. John approached Marina, his words heavy with emotion. "Doctor, thank you. Thank you for having the courage we didn't." Marina looked at Lara, who was now drawing a bright sun in the corner of her paper. "No, John. The courage was in all of you. All along, it just needed someone to light the first spark." The sound of the sirens was getting closer, and with them came the promise of justice Lara had waited for so long. The patrol cars arrived in a cloud of dust, closely followed by an ambulance and a vehicle from Child Protective Services. Marina felt a profound relief to see it wasn't just local authorities. There were also officers from other jurisdictions, meaning her report to the state capital had taken effect. Sheriff Thompson, known for his connections to Richard, was the first out of his patrol car. His face clearly showed the internal conflict between his professional duty and his personal interests. "Mr. Morgan, I need to understand what's happening here." But before Richard could answer, an elegant, determined woman stepped out of one of the unmarked cars. It was Dr. Carmen Rodriguez, the human rights lawyer Marina had spoken to. She had arrived earlier than expected, accompanied by a federal investigator. "Sheriff Thompson, I'm Dr. Carmen Rodriguez, representing the Child Rights Advocacy Group. We are here investigating allegations of child abuse." Her voice was firm and professional, leaving no room for negotiation. The federal investigator, a tall, serious man named Agent Davis, presented his identification. "Sheriff, this investigation is now under federal jurisdiction. We need everyone present to be interviewed as witnesses." Richard tried to maintain his composure, but Marina could see the panic growing in his eyes. "This is a ridiculous misunderstanding. My daughter has special needs and sometimes needs to be restrained for her own safety." Restrained? Dr. Rodriguez looked at Lara, who was still in Marina's arms, and her expression hardened. "Mr. Morgan, chaining a 6-year-old child in a damp basement does not constitute medical care in any jurisdiction in the world." The paramedic who had arrived with the ambulance approached Marina. "May I examine the girl? We need to check her health status." Marina hesitated for a moment, worried about how Lara would react to another stranger, but the girl surprised. "Everyone." She looked at the paramedic, a young woman with a gentle smile, and extended her arms to her. "Hi, sweetie," the paramedic said softly. "My name is Anna. I'm just going to check if you're okay, all right?" While Anna examined Lara with extreme care, noting signs of malnutrition and dehydration, Agent Davis began interviewing the witnesses. Mrs. Henderson was first, her voice firm despite her emotion. "Agent, I've known Richard Morgan for 20 years. I always thought it was strange we never saw the girl, but we figured she was at some boarding school." Her words were punctuated by indignation. "If we had known, if someone had told us." John was next, and his words were devastating to Richard's defense. He always said it was for her own good, that she was dangerous. But I saw how gentle she was with the animals, how she tried to communicate through drawings. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid of losing my job. Peter confirmed John's testimony, adding details about the conditions in which Lara was kept. She'd be there all day, rain or shine. Mr. Morgan wouldn't let us give her food or water without his permission. Marina was called to testify, and she handed over all the evidence she had collected: photos, recordings, Lara's drawings. Agent Davis examined each item carefully, his expression growing grimmer with each piece of evidence. Dr. Scott. He said, "Your courage and determination have saved this child's life. These materials constitute solid evidence of systematic abuse." As the statements were being collected, Dr. Rodriguez focused on Lara. With infinite patience, she managed to get the girl to communicate through drawings, showing her daily routine, where she slept, when she received food. "Lara, can you show me where your bed is?" Carmen asked gently. The girl drew the pigpen floor with some rags in the corner. There was no real bed. She slept on the cold, damp ground among the animals. Richard, realizing his options were dwindling, played his last card. "Sheriff Thompson, you've known me for years. You know I'm a good man, a respectable contributor to this community." But the sheriff, even with his personal connections to Richard, couldn't ignore the overwhelming evidence before his eyes. "Mr. Morgan, you'll have to come with us down to the station for questioning." "This is absurd. I know my rights," Richard exploded. "I'll sue all of you for trespassing and defamation." Agent Davis approached Richard with handcuffs. "Mr. Morgan, you are being arrested on suspicion of child abuse, false imprisonment, and neglect. You have the right to remain silent." As Richard was handcuffed, Lara watched everything with wide, expressive eyes. For the first time in her life, she was seeing her father being held accountable for his actions. The girl showed no sadness or fear, just a silent curiosity, as if trying to understand that this was justice finally arriving. Marina knelt beside Lara. "You're going to be okay now, sweetie. Good people will take care of you." Lara took Marina's hand and led her to Tempest, who was still in the living room, watching everything with his intelligent eyes. The girl hugged the horse's neck and then pointed to Marina, as if introducing her two saviors to each other. Inna, the paramedic, approached Marina. "She needs to be taken to the hospital for more detailed exams, but physically she'll recover. What impresses me most is how she maintained hope. Children who go through trauma like this often shut down completely." Marina looked at Lara, who was now drawing on the floor. No longer sad figures behind bars, but smiling people, a horse running free, and a bright sun illuminating everything. "She's special," Marina said softly. "She always knew. She deserved better. She just needed someone to believe in her." Justice had arrived at Golden Fields Ranch, and with it, a new chance at life for Lara. St. Mary's Regional Hospital had never received a case that touched the hearts of the entire medical team so deeply. Lara arrived still in Marina's arms, refusing to be separated from the only person who had shown kindness in her life of suffering. The hospital director, Dr. Helen Carter, an experienced pediatrician, personally took charge of the case. "Marina," Dr. Carter said gently, "I know you're not on our staff, but would it be possible for you to stay with Lara during the initial exams? She clearly trusts you, and it will make our work much easier." Marina nodded without hesitation. She had called the veterinary clinic where she occasionally worked, explaining the situation, and they immediately gave her a few days off so she could help with Lara's transition. The initial exams revealed what Marina already suspected: severe malnutrition, dehydration, various skin infections due to unsanitary conditions, and signs of deep psychological stress. But Dr. Carter also found something surprising. "Physically, she'll recover completely," the pediatrician explained to Marina and Dr. Rodriguez, who had remained at the hospital. "But what impresses me most is her emotional resilience. Children who endure prolonged trauma often show signs of severe regression. Lara has kept her cognitive abilities intact. During her bath, the first real bath Lara had taken in weeks, the girl showed joyful curiosity with the warm, clean water. She played with the soap bubbles, giggling softly for the first time Marina had heard her laugh. It was a musical, pure sound that brought tears to the eyes of all the nurses present. "Look, Lara," Marina said, blowing soap bubbles for the girl. "Can you try to catch them?" Lara stretched out her small hands, trying to capture the iridescent bubbles. When one popped on her palm, she looked at Marina with an expression of wondrous discovery, as if experiencing magic for the first time. The hospital's child psychologist, Dr. Sophia Miller, joined the team on the second day. She specialized in autistic children and immediately recognized in Lara signs of a distinct intelligence hidden beneath the trauma. "Marina," Dr. Miller explained, "Lara isn't just autistic. She's high-functioning autistic with extraordinary visual and spatial abilities. The drawings she makes show a complex understanding of emotional and spatial relationships." To prove her point, Dr. Miller brought more elaborate art supplies, colored pencils, large paper, even some non-toxic paints. What Lara created left everyone impressed. She drew the ranch with architectural precision, showing each building in perfect perspective. But more than that, she used colors to represent emotions. The pigpen was painted in dark shades of gray and brown, while Tempest's stable gleamed in golden hues. The main house was blood red, but there was a small blue window, the basement where she had found Marina. "She's telling us her story through art," Dr. Miller whispered, studying the drawings. "Every color, every line has emotional significance." On the third day, something extraordinary happened. Lara began to speak. Not much, just simple words, but each one was laden with meaning. Her first complete word was Marina, the second was Tempest. "Tempest, good," Lara said in her small, raspy voice, unused for so long. "Tempest, friend." Marina had to leave the room to cry. The head nurse, Nurse Beatrice, a woman in her 60s who had worked at the hospital for decades, found her in the hallway. "My dear," Nurse Beatrice said softly, "you saved much more than this girl's life. You saved her soul." During the afternoon, Dr. Rodriguez brought news about the legal case. Richard is being held in preventive detention. His lawyers tried to argue he was just trying to control dangerous behavior, but the evidence is overwhelming. She showed Marina a folder full of documents. Lara's drawings, your statements, the photos you took, all of this constitutes irrefutable evidence. Besides, other ranch employees have started talking. It seems this behavior had been going on for years. "And what about Lara's future?" Marina asked, looking through the window of the room where the girls slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. "We're looking for a family specializing in caring for autistic children. There's a family in the state capital, the Watsons, who have expressed interest. They have experience adopting children with special needs." Marina felt a pang in her heart. She had grown deeply attached to Lara, but knew she didn't have the experience or resources to properly care for a child with autism. That night, Marina slept in the chair beside Lara's bed, waking several times to check if the girl was okay. On one such occasion, she found Lara awake, drawing in a notepad Dr. Miller had left. "What are you drawing, sweetie?" Lara showed her. The drawing. Two figures holding hands, one large and one small, walking towards a rising sun. Above the sun, she had written in shaky but legible letters, "Thank you." Marina hugged Lara gently. "No, sweetie, thank you. You taught me what true courage means." Lara nestled into Marina's arms and whispered something that made the veterinarian's heart overflow with emotion. "Marina, heart mom." At that moment, Marina understood that regardless of where the future took Lara, they would always have a special connection. She had been the first person to see the extraordinary child hidden beneath the trauma, and Lara had been the first to teach Marina about the transformative power of unconditional love. Both were healing, each in their own way, finding light after so much darkness. Lara's second week in the hospital brought an unexpected surprise that would change everything. Marina was helping the girl with motor skill exercises when a nurse came to tell her she had visitors. In the hallway, she found John and Peter, both holding their hats in their hands, visibly nervous. "Doctor," John said, his voice thick with emotion, "we'd like to see the girl if possible. We brought something for her." Peter held a handcrafted wooden box he had made himself. "It's a set of special pencils and paper. I thought she might like it since she enjoys drawing so much." Marina was touched by the men's demonstration of care. "I'm sure she'll be happy to see you, but you need to know she's still recovering emotionally." When they entered the room, Lara was sitting on the bed, drawing on a large pad. Upon seeing John and Peter, she showed no fear, just cautious curiosity. Slowly, she waved her small hand, a gesture that visibly moved both men. "Hi, Lara," Peter said softly. "Remember me? I'm Peter. I'm so sorry I didn't help you sooner." To everyone's surprise, Lara picked up one of her drawings and handed it to Peter. It was a drawing of herself in the pig pen, but this time there were two figures watching from afar with sad expressions, clearly John and Peter. In the corner of the paper, she had drawn small hearts floating towards the two figures. "She knew," John whispered, his hands trembling as he held the drawing. "She knew we cared, even when we didn't have the courage to act." Peter opened the wooden box he had brought, revealing colored pencils arranged by shade and pads of paper of different textures. Lara's eyes lit up in a way Marina had never seen before. "Can I?" Lara asked, pointing to the materials. It was the first complete sentence she had spoken to anyone besides Marina. "Of course, sweetie, it's all yours," Peter replied, his voice choked with emotion. Lara immediately began experimenting with the new materials, creating color combinations that demonstrated an intuitive understanding of visual harmony. She drew John and Peter not as they were on the ranch, men bowed by fear, but as she saw them in her heart, tall, brave figures with golden halos around their heads. "John," Marina said, observing the man's emotional reaction to the drawings, "do you want to tell Lara what happened to her father?" John looked at Peter, who nodded encouragingly. "Lara, your father was taken away by people who will make sure he learns to be a better person. You won't have to stay in bad places anymore." Lara stopped drawing and looked at John with her expressive eyes. Slowly, she nodded and returned to her drawing, this time creating an image of an open door with golden light streaming from within. Dr. Miller, who had discreetly entered the room, watched the interaction with professional interest. "Lara is demonstrating a remarkable ability to process complex emotions through art. It's a very positive sign for her recovery." During the afternoon, news arrived that left Marina in emotional conflict. Dr. Rodriguez appeared with an elegant, middle-aged woman, introducing her as Marcia Watson, the potential adoptive mother. "Marina," Dr. Rodriguez said, "I'd like you to meet Mrs. Watson. She and her husband have experience with 3 other autistic children they've adopted over the years." Marcia Watson had a warm smile and kind eyes that immediately won Marina's sympathy. "Dr. Scott, I've heard so much about you. What you did for Lara is extraordinary." "I just did what any decent person would do," Marina replied, but inside she felt a mixture of pride and anticipated sadness at the approaching separation. "May I meet Lara?" Marcia asked. "I don't intend to rush anything. I know she needs time to adjust to the idea of a new family." When Marcia entered the room, Lara was showing her drawings to John and Peter. The girl looked at the visitor with curiosity, without fear, but also without the immediate openness she had shown Marina. Marcia approached slowly, respecting Lara's space. "Hi, Lara, my name is Marcia. You make very beautiful drawings." Lara studied Marcia for a long moment, then picked up a piece of paper and began to draw. Surprisingly, she drew a large house with many windows, each showing a different smiling face. In the center of the house, she drew a small figure, herself, surrounded by larger figures that seemed to be offering hugs. "I think she understands more than we imagine," Marcia whispered to Marina. "She's telling us She wants a big, loving family. That night, when everyone had left, Marina was alone with Lara. The girl seemed thoughtful, playing with the new colored pencils. "Lara," Marina said softly, "you know that good people are going to take care of you, don't you? People who will love you just the way you are." Lara looked at Marina and picked up a clean sheet of paper. She drew two figures holding hands, one clearly Marina and the other clearly herself. But around the two figures, she drew a golden circle that extended to include other people. John, Peter, Marcia, and faces Marina didn't recognize, but that looked friendly and welcoming. "Big family," Lara said in her small but clear voice. "Marina always family." Marina hugged Lara, her own tears mingling with the understanding that true love doesn't diminish when shared. It multiplies. Lara was teaching everyone around her that family isn't just about blood or living in the same house. It's about the people who choose to stand by your side in the toughest times. As Lara fell asleep in her arms, Marina knew that no matter where the future took them, they would always be connected by a love that had been born in darkness and blossomed in the light of hope. Lara's 15th day in the hospital brought an event no one expected. Marina was in the hallway talking to Dr. Carter about discharge plans when a nurse hurried over, visibly distraught. "Doctor, there's a man at the reception demanding to see Lara. He says he's her father and has legal rights." The nurse looked nervously at Marina. "It's Mr. Richard Morgan. He's accompanied by lawyers." Marina's blood ran cold. "How is that possible? Isn't he supposed to be in jail?" Dr. Rodriguez appeared in the hallway at that moment, her face a mask of controlled tension. "Marina, we need to talk. Richard was released on bail this morning. His lawyers managed to argue he's not a flight risk and that the evidence is circumstantial." "Circumstantial?" Marina nearly shouted. "We found him with his daughter chained in the basement." I know, but the legal system has its processes. He's still facing charges, but technically he retains custody of Lara until a judge decides otherwise." Carmen took a deep breath. "He's come to take his daughter." Marina felt as if the world was crumbling around her. "We can't let this happen. Lara has barely begun to recover. There's a hearing scheduled in 3 days where custody will be decided definitively, but until then..." Carmen didn't need to finish the sentence. Marina rushed to Lara's room. The girl was playing quietly with her colored pencils, oblivious to the approaching storm. She smiled when she saw Marina, a smile that had become more frequent in recent days. "Marina," Lara said happily, showing a new drawing. "Look!" It was a drawing of Tempest running freely in a green field, with herself on his back, arms outstretched to the wind. It was an image of pure freedom, and it broke Marina's heart to know that freedom might be about to end. "Lara, sweetie." Marina knelt beside the bed, choosing her words carefully. "Do you remember your father?" Lara's smile vanished instantly. She nodded slowly, and Marina saw fear returning to her eyes. "Daddy, angry, Daddy, chain. He's here, sweetie. But I want you to know that many people are fighting to make sure you stay safe." Marina held Lara's small hands. "Do you trust me?" Lara nodded vigorously. "Marina protects." At that moment, loud voices echoed down the hall. Richard had forced his way in, accompanied by 2 well-dressed lawyers and Sheriff Thompson himself, who looked extremely uncomfortable with the situation. "Where is my daughter?" Richard's voice carried the authority he was accustomed to wielding. "I've come to take her home." Dr. Carter stepped into his path. "Mr. Morgan, this child is under medical care. She cannot be removed without a proper medical discharge." "Then give her the discharge, now." Richard turned to his lawyers. "She's my daughter. I have rights." Lara heard her father's voice and instinctively shrank back on the bed, clinging to Marina as if her life depended on it. "No, don't want... Please, Marina." Dr. Miller, who had arrived upon hearing the commotion, approached Richard with professional determination. "Mr. Morgan, as the psychologist responsible for this case, I must inform you that removing Lara from the environment where she is currently feeling safe would be extremely detrimental to her psychological recovery." "Recovery?" Richard laughed coldly. "She doesn't need recovery. She needs discipline, which is what she hasn't been getting here." Those words caused something extraordinary to happen. Lara, who had always been silent before her father, suddenly stood up on the bed with a strength that surprised everyone. She screamed, "No!" The scream echoed through the hospital, filled with years of repressed pain and a newfound determination. "Don't want to go, don't want Chain, want to stay with Marina." Richard was visibly shocked. He had never heard Lara speak so clearly, and certainly never seen her defy him. "Lara, stop this theatrics immediately." But Lara didn't stop. Instead, she grabbed her drawings, all of them showing her life on the ranch, the suffering, but also the hope she had found. She held them out to Sheriff Thompson. "Look," she said, her small voice firm, "look what Daddy did." The drawings spoke for themselves. The sheriff, despite his connections to Richard, couldn't ignore a child's visual testimony. His hands trembled slightly as he examined each image. At that crucial moment, something unexpected happened. John and Peter appeared in the hallway, accompanied by other ranch employees. They had come to visit Lara and stumbled upon the situation. "Mr. Morgan," John said, his voice firmer than Marina had ever heard, "we can't stay silent anymore." Peter joined him. "We saw everything for years, and now we're going to tell the truth." One by one, the ranch employees began to testify. They told about the conditions Lara was kept in, about the cruel punishments, about how she was deprived of food and water. Their voices, once silenced by fear, now spoke in unison. Sheriff Thompson, confronted with so many testimonies and Lara's drawings in his hands, made a decision that would change everything. "Mr. Morgan, given the evidence presented and the child's emotional state, I'm going to request an emergency protection order. Lara will remain in hospital custody until the hearing." Richard exploded in fury, but his threats and influence no longer held the same power. The truth had been brought to light, and there was no hiding it again. As Richard was escorted out of the hospital by security, Lara clung to Marina with a strength surprising for such a small child. "Stayed?" she asked, her large, hopeful eyes fixed on Marina. "I stayed," Marina replied, her own tears mingling with Lara's. "And you're going to stay too, safe, with people who love you." At that moment, Marina understood they had won the most important battle. Lara had found her voice, and with it, the strength to fight for her own freedom. The moment of truth had arrived, and the truth had prevailed. 3 days after the confrontation at the hospital, the hearing that would define Lara's future took place at the county courthouse. The presiding judge, Judge Marcus Peterson, had requested a transfer of the case due to his own connections with Richard, and in his place sat Judge Isabella Monroe, a magistrate known for her impartiality and expertise in child advocacy law. Marina arrived at the courthouse accompanied by Lara, who insisted on attending the hearing. The girl carried a folder with her most important drawings, those that told her story better than any words could. She wore a new dress Marcia Watson had brought, light blue with small flowers, and her hair was clean and carefully combed. "I'm scared," Lara whispered to Marina as they waited outside the courtroom. "I know, sweetie, but remember what we talked about. Today, you're going to use your voice to tell your truth, and I'll be right beside you the whole time." Marina held Lara's small hand, offering her all the strength she could. When they entered the courtroom, Marina was surprised by the number of people present. Besides the lawyers and parties involved, John, Peter, other ranch employees, Mrs. Henderson and several neighbors, Dr. Carter and Dr. Miller from the hospital, and even Anna, the paramedic who had cared for Lara on the first day, were there. Richard sat at the defendant's table with his lawyers, his appearance impeccable as always, but Marina noticed something had changed in his eyes. There was a defeat there, an understanding that his controlled world had definitively crumbled. Judge Isabella Monroe, a woman in her 50s with kind but firm eyes, opened the session. This hearing has been convened to determine the best custody arrangement for the minor, Lara Morgan, considering the serious allegations of abuse and neglect against her biological father. The first to testify were the ranch employees. John, who had found a courage he didn't know he possessed, spoke with a firm voice about the years of forced silence and what they had witnessed. Peter confirmed every detail, adding his own observations about how Lara was treated. "Your Honor," John said, "for all these years, we saw that child treated worse than the animals on the ranch. And we were cowards. But we can't live with this guilt anymore." Dr. Miller presented her psychological evaluation of Lara, explaining how the trauma had affected her development, but also highlighting her extraordinary resilience and capacity for recovery. This child possesses remarkable emotional intelligence despite everything she has suffered. With the right environment, she can have a full and happy life. When it was Richard's turn to defend himself, his lawyers tried to argue that he had acted with the best intentions, trying to control behaviors he considered dangerous. But their words sounded hollow against the mountain of evidence. Richard stood up to speak in his own defense, and Marina saw something she hadn't expected. Tears in his eyes. "Your Honor, I lost my wife when Lara was born, and when I found out she was different, I didn't know how to handle it." His voice faltered for a moment. "I thought I was protecting my reputation, my business, but now I realize I destroyed the only thing that truly mattered, my daughter." He looked at Lara, who watched him with serious but unafraid eyes. "Lara, I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I now understand how wrong I was." It was the first time Richard had directly addressed Lara with anything resembling affection. The girl studied him for a long moment, then picked up the paper and pencil she had brought. To everyone's surprise, she drew something new, two figures separated by a great distance but connected by a faint, golden line. It was her way of saying that while she couldn't completely forgive, she had acknowledged his humanity. When it was Lara's turn to speak, Judge Monroe addressed her with extreme gentleness. "Lara, would you like to tell us how you feel?" Lara stood up, holding Marina's hand for support. In a clear voice that surprised even Marina, she said, "I want to stay with people who love me. I want to learn new things. I want a family that understands me." She looked at Marcia Watson, who was seated in the observers' chairs. "Mrs. Watson said she has other children like me. I want to meet them." Then, to general surprise, she turned to Richard. "Daddy, I don't want to live with you, but I hope you learn to be better." Lara's words brought a profound silence to the room. Her ability to express both forgiveness and clear boundaries demonstrated extraordinary emotional maturity. Judge Monroe deliberated for only a few minutes before announcing her decision. "Given the evidence presented and considering the best interests of the child, I order that custody of Lara Morgan be transferred to the Watson family, who have demonstrated the capacity and experience to care for children with special needs." She addressed Richard. "Mr. Morgan, you are prohibited from any contact with the minor until you complete a psychological rehabilitation program and demonstrate genuine change in your behavior." When the hearing ended, Marina hugged Lara tightly. "You were so brave today, sweetie." "Marina always with me?" Lara asked, her big eyes full of hope. Marcia Watson approached them. "Marina, you would always be welcome in our home. Lara, clearly, considers you part of her family." Marina looked at the girl who had changed her life forever. "Always, Lara. No matter where you are, we'll always be part of each other's family." At that moment, Marina understood they had achieved more than justice. They had discovered that true love can overcome any trauma, and that family is a choice, not just blood. The resolution had arrived, bringing not only justice, but also the promise of a future full of possibilities for an extraordinary girl who had found her voice and her place in the world. 1 year later, life had transformed in ways no one could have imagined. Marina drove along the familiar rural roads, but this time with a smile on her face and a sense of peace in her heart. In the passenger seat was a special gift for Lara, a painting she had commissioned from a local artist, showing Tempest running free in a golden field. Golden Fields Ranch had changed hands. After Richard's criminal convictions and civil lawsuits, the property was sold to a small farmers' co-op that transformed the place into a model of sustainable agriculture and ethical animal treatment. John had become the manager, finally using his experience for positive ends, while Peter coordinated an animal-assisted therapy program for special needs children. Marina now ran her own veterinary clinic in town, specializing in animal therapy for children with special needs. Her work had gained regional recognition, but none of it mattered as much as the monthly meeting she was about to have. The Watson home was a place of true welcome. Located on the outskirts of the state capital, it had an immense yard where children of different ages played and laughed. Marcia had kept her promise. Her family welcomed not only Lara, but other children who needed a specialized home. When Marina arrived, she was greeted by a sight that still moved her deeply. Lara, now 7, ran towards the gate with a radiant smile that lit up her entire face. Her hair had grown long and shiny, tied in colorful braids she had learned to do herself. She wore a t-shirt with a horse print and carried a sketchbook under her arm. "Marina! Marina!" Lara cried, her arms reaching out for a hug that seemed to last an eternity. "Hi, my sweet girl. How are you?" Marina knelt to Lara's height, studying the girl's face for the signs of happiness she always looked for. "I'm great! Look what I learned." Lara opened her sketchbook, revealing drawings that showed impressive technical evolution. They were no longer just simple figures. They were complex compositions with perspective, shading, and a richness of detail that demonstrated how her mind had developed. One particular drawing caught Marina's attention. It showed a classroom full of children, all different but all smiling. In the center, a figure clearly representing Lara stood, explaining something on the blackboard. "This is my dream," Lara explained seriously. "I want to be a teacher for special kids like me. I want to help them discover their talents." Marina felt her eyes fill with tears of pride. "And you will, sweetie. I'm absolutely sure of it." Marcia approached, her warm smile encompassing both of them. "Marina, I need to tell you the news. Lara was accepted into the school's gifted and talented program. Her artistic abilities and emotional intelligence impressed all the teachers. During lunch, Marina heard about Lara's achievements, how she had befriended all the children in the house, how she helped her younger foster siblings adapt, how her drawings had been exhibited in a local gallery, raising funds for other at-risk children. "And there's more," said Charles Watson, the adoptive father, his eyes shining with pride. "Lara started a project to visit hospitals and draw portraits of the children there. She says she wants to give them beautiful memories to take home." In the afternoon, they made the special visit that had become a tradition. The sanctuary where Tempest now lived was a few miles from the Watson home. The horse had been bought by an animal rights organization after the trial and now lived in total freedom, cared for by specialized veterinarians. When Tempest saw Lara approaching, the magnificent animal trotted towards her with obvious joy. Lara had grown enough to hug the horse's neck without needing help, and the connection between them remained as strong as ever. "Tempest, I brought a new drawing for you," Lara said, showing an image of them both running together in an infinite field. "One day, when I'm bigger, I'll learn to ride for real." Marina watched the interaction with deep contentment. This was the circle coming full circle in the most beautiful way possible. All of them free, all of them healed, all of them connected by bonds born in adversity, but flourishing in love. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in golden hues that rivaled the beauty of Lara's drawings, Marina prepared to leave. But first, Lara gave her a special gift. "I made this for you," the girl said, handing her a small but perfectly executed painting. It was a self-portrait of Lara smiling, but in the reflection of her eyes, Marina could see her own image, forever part of the girl's worldview. On the back of the painting, written in the careful handwriting Lara had developed, were the words that summarized their entire journey. "To Marina, who taught me that being different is being special. With eternal love, Lara." As she drove home, Marina reflected on how a terrible discovery had transformed into the greatest blessing of her life. She had saved Lara, but Lara had also saved Marina, teaching her about courage, the power of unconditional love, and how one person can make a difference in the world. The car radio played soft music as Marina smiled at the stars beginning to appear in the night sky. Somewhere, an extraordinary girl was falling asleep in a comfortable bed, surrounded by a family that loved her exactly as she was, dreaming of a future where she herself would be the savior of other children needing hope. And on a transformed ranch, animals grazed freely under the same starry sky, cared for by men who had found redemption through the courage to do what was right. The circle was complete, but the story continued. Because stories of true love never really end, they just transform into new journeys of hope.